Now, getting back to what I think could be, what I believe and a lot of people believe it is the real issue here. Do you believe attention is being drawn away from this, from what we think is a real issue, with all the different reports being published or not published, as in the ACPO and the rest of it? Nobody seems to be asking at the minute, how was it possible for our children to be abused for decades? Do you think that's gone by the wayside?
Yeah, I mean, we've all fallen into a trap. I've been guilty of it in this interview. I was guilty of it yesterday when I was interviewed by the BBC. We've all fallen for it again, haven't we? We've ended up talking about the abuse inquiry and not talking about the abuse. And the abuse inquiry is a sideshow, and you've got to give ministers credit where it's due. They have very skillfully and very successfully deflected the agenda to talking about the abuse inquiry and managed to sideline the issue about the abuse itself. And I think at some stage the agenda has to be brought back to talking about the abuse, because if you follow some of the accounts that are given by some of the victims, you're dealing with what is effectively state-sponsored paedophilia, which occurred over decades. Now, I'm not saying all of these accounts are necessarily true. I'm not saying that there isn't some balance to be brought to some of the evidence, but this is a very serious matter. And what is particularly disturbing is a number of people, I recall, said, look, I drew this to the attention of the police, I drew it to the attention of the appropriate authorities, it was all swept under the carpet, nothing was done about it. Too many of the offenders were too well connected, the new important people, it was just made sure that I wouldn't get any justice. And of course, you've got to remember, people also say, and I know that Lenny Harper's media work was in some ways controversial, but a lot of people also say, it wasn't until I saw Mr. Harper on television that I felt confidence. When I saw him on television, I thought, here is somebody we can trust. Here is somebody I can talk to. Here is somebody who is not going to sweep these allegations under the carpet yet again. I'm willing to come forward now. I've kept this quiet for decades, but now I'm willing to come forward because of what I've seen Mr. Harper doing on television. Now, that seems to me where the energy and where the national conversation in Jersey ought to be going about this. And I'm disappointed that I've allowed myself to be sidetracked into talking about the abuse inquiry and not the abuse. And I think a lot of other people need to just step back and challenge themselves and say, look, here, what's going on here? Why is it that just 10 days ago in the States we were talking about how we deal with the abuse, and now we've gone back to talking about the abuse inquiry here? You know, what is the agenda, and why is the conversation being dragged into management issues in an inquiry that happened 3 years ago, and we don't seem to be talking at all about all the terrible things that happened in state institutions over those decades?
Because we can't get away from that fact, can we? Our children were abused for decades, and we need to concentrate on it was never ever detected. We need to, do you agree? We need to concentrate on how this was allowed to happen for decades and what we can do to stop it happening again.
I think we need somehow to stop ourselves getting sidelined into talking about the abuse inquiry, and we need to talk about the abuse. And that is, I think, a wider conversation for Jersey to have. But, yeah, I'm tired of defending my role in the abuse inquiry. I'm quite proud of the part that I've played in that, because what we did was break down the barriers. Now, some people might have said that we broke down the barriers with a sledgehammer when we could have done it another way. Well, I didn't see anybody else breaking down the barriers over all those decades. No. We broke down the barriers and we created a situation in which people felt confident to come forward. That was the achievement. I always recognised that there was going to be a point where other people needed to take that inquiry forward in a more conventional way. But I think, if you like, the initial shock and awe treatment, where we broke down the barriers, where we created that wide acceptance that this was a once and for all opportunity to put all of this behind us, and to bring everything out in the open and to end all the arguments, I think that was a very positive achievement. I'm sorry that the actions that were taken in November 2008 have effectively reopened all the suspicions about the dark side, about the cover-ups and all that sort of thing. Because if we'd have continued to conduct the inquiry in the way that I envisaged, then all of the arguments would have been put to an end, I believe. I don't think everybody would have been satisfied, and I think a lot of people would still have got away with it. But I believe that we had it in us to satisfy everybody that everything had been done and to close down the issue. What we've got now is a running sore, and it's a running sore that keeps having salt poured into it by Jersey ministers who want us to talk about the abuse inquiry when we really ought to be talking about the abuse.